So for the moment, I just want to acknowledge and just say that these sessions are presented in collaboration with the library, and a special shout out to Justine, who helps pull it all together. Also, a thank you to Stop and Shop for donating food and drink, and also we have another volunteer, Amy Wolf, who helps to post the flyers around the town. So I think we've probably said this a few times at all the meetings, is that we really would welcome some new members. It is an official committee of 5 members with 1 alternate, and there have been only 3 formal members of this committee. So if anybody is interested in participating, or even just coming to a meeting to listen in or participate in a conversation or volunteer, we would welcome that. Before we begin, next month, we've invited our DPW Director, Jared Cabral, who will be giving a presentation about the workings of our transfer station. Just finished the poster and it's up on the table there. It's called Talking Trash. And if you've ever wondered what happens to all the stuff that you leave at the transfer station, because there's a lot of things that happen after we drop things off, he will be talking about that. And then Georgia, our volunteer, will be running a session on mental and emotional health, what it's like facing the climate crisis. So that will be in February, so stay tuned. And if you're not on our email list, please sign up in the back. And if you're also interested, there are email lists, ways to sign up for the town announcements that get pushed out to you as announcements, minutes, as well as agendas. So the purpose for tonight, this came to me because somebody once said, why should I do this? Why should I electrify? Because that, as you know, is sort of the mantra now we're hearing, we really need to push towards electrification. And it kind of threw me, and I said, well, it's a good idea. And he said, but the grid is dirty, so why? And that just led me to think about looking at the big picture as well as kind of the details of what's going on, particularly on the Cape and in Massachusetts. And since we're in that process of moving towards full electrification, I've asked Maggie Downey, the Executive Director, and Mariel Marchand, the Power Supply Planner from Cape Light Compact. So I think you'll be giving a presentation and then open to questions.
Yes.
So, all right, well, welcome.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here. So Mariel handed out copies of the presentation, and we have some insulated bags and some also small bags that are made of recyclable materials and information about the program. So please help yourself. We are here because you and I, everyone who pays an electric bill, pays for the Cape Light Compact. So the Cape Light Compact is the town of Truro and 20 other towns. We do 3 primary things. We're going to touch on that sort of, but really focus on electrification. Why should we do anything? Why should we care about electrification? What's happening in Massachusetts, and how does it really relate in my own town? We have a power supply contract. In 1997, 1998, the town, 21 towns on the Cape and Vineyard, including Town Council in Barnstable, voted a town meeting to become a municipal aggregator. So as I said, we have a board. Your town board of selectmen appoint representatives to the Cape Light Compact Board, and we go out and we have they deregulated the electric utility industry in 1997, which allows us to choose our electric supplier. And our very forward-thinking and wise local elected officials, local selectmen, county commissioners, said, we're not going to have a lot of negotiating capacity or strengths. So they worked with our legislative delegation at the time to authorize municipal aggregators which negotiate the terms and conditions of a power supply contract. So Mariel's going to talk a little bit about our power supply contract, but that's the primary focus of what we do. We're an opt-out aggregator, so anyone who opens up a new electric account is automatically enrolled in the Cape Light Compact unless you choose to opt out or select another supplier. The choice is yours, but we're the default supplier on Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard. We also run, and 99% of our work and staff focus on energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is the foundation of everything we do. The cheapest kilowatt greenest kilowatt is the kilowatt you don't use, the energy you don't consume, no GHGs committed, no purchasing of electrons. And that really was, I'm dating myself back to the 90s, 1994, 95, when the local elected officials wanted to make sure, because we were paying into an energy efficiency fund started back in the late 80s. They wanted to make sure that the energy efficiency funds that we paid into on the Cape stayed on the Cape and were reinvested in programs on the Cape and Vineyard, as opposed to going over the bridge into a much larger pool of resources. And then we advocate for consumers, and that's done primarily through our participation in the Department of Public Utilities dockets. We're very active in the Eversource rate case, we're active in the grid modernization case, time of use, smart meters, making sure that our interests are represented and we don't get left behind as technology and the grid evolves. Legally, we are a joint powers entity. We reorganized in 2016 and 17 under the Municipal Modernization Act. We just had a formal intergovernmental agreement. That's what cities and towns in Massachusetts signed to work cooperatively. And that was a recommendation of the Department of Revenue, because it set up checks and balances. It took the treasury services out, so we have a separate outside treasurer that we go out to bid, so that this entity does not have access to any of our funds. We don't have access to our bank accounts or checks, so there's a built-in checks and balance and everything that the Cape Light Compact does. We still have representatives from all the towns. So Bob Higgins-Steele is your representative from the town of Truro, appointed by the selectmen. We were the first municipal aggregator in the country. There are many other community choice aggregators, they call themselves, throughout the United States, in states that have deregulated. California is really big, Ohio, Texas, and in Massachusetts we were the only 21 towns that organized for many, many years. Now we have 351 cities and towns, and over half of our cities and towns have become municipal aggregators. We are still the only entity or group of towns that run locally energy efficiency programs. Everywhere else they're run by either the gas utility or the electric utility. And as I said, we're local. Our offices are located in South Yarmouth on Wright's Path. We're always available either by phone or by walking in to answer questions about your electric bill, or just help with how do I plan or start my own decarbonization journey. So in order to answer the question about why should I electrify, why should I care, I started with explaining Massachusetts climate policies, because that is what is driving the conversation and the actions that you're reading about in the paper. It was in the New York Times, it was in the Cape Cod Times today, announcing the South Fork Wind, which is offshore, got its first electrons landing out on Long Island, and Vineyard Wind is right behind it. Hopefully later this month or early in January, they will be live. So it's happening. And it's happening because we have a Green Communities Act that was passed in 2008, updated in 2018, and then 2021, 2022, as we continue to really fine-tune our climate policy. And the most recent one was called an Act of Creating Next Generation Roadmap, Massachusetts Climate Policy. And that was groundbreaking and kind of a big shift for the Cape Light Compact, because we were created under the 1997 Restructuring Act, which says you save kilowatt hours. It's all about reducing energy, whether you're heating with electricity or if it's natural gas, lowering that overall, your therms, your kilowatt hours. The Climate Act said you, Cape Light Compact, now have to put together a plan, and we're giving you greenhouse gas reduction goals. So we're starting to see and evolve from an energy efficiency plan to a decarbonization plan. That the companion document to the Climate Act was the Clean Energy Climate Plan. So Massachusetts has a CECP, and that also set out the policies on how we're going to achieve the Climate Act. And that specifically identifies by 2050, gives us very direct goals, that we need to electrify 1 million homes in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in order to comply with the Global Warming Solutions Act. So these are like bills built on each other over a period of the last 10 years, all focusing on climate. And in order to reach the GWSA, Global Warming Solution Act goals, by 2050 we need to electrify 1 million homes and 300 to 400 million square feet of commercial space. We also have to reduce electric power emissions by 53% by 2025, and 70% by 2030 from 1990 levels, which is when the act was passed. Or set law, that was a date that was included in the law. And we're getting there. Our first steps, and Mariel's going to talk about this, new coal plants, oil plants eliminated from Massachusetts, cleaning up the grid, trying to bring in hydro, New England Connector Project, offshore wind. All of these are policies that are taking much longer, in reality, much longer than any of the legislators who passed law hoped, but they are moving at a glacial pace, it feels sometimes. I think I should attend that climate therapy counseling. I definitely would use it because it is frustrating at the pace, how slow these things are happening. Because in a way, what we're doing with electrification and specifically heat pumps, we are ahead of the grid and all these other bigger policies. They were, when we were talking about these, when I was in the discussion with these over 20 years ago, and then 10 years ago, they would be up and running by now. It just hasn't materialized till today when we got that first South Fork electrons flowing from offshore wind. So how do you meet your climate goals? What do you do personally, whether it's home or business? First and foremost, it's almost like building a house. It's like energy efficiency is the foundation of everything. Making sure that your home, business is weatherized, air sealing, insulation, energy efficiency, appliances, lighting, all of that equipment. That's what the Cape Light Compact programs have been doing. We started these in 2001. That's when the town started running these programs. We've been doing them for over 20 plus years, and they've evolved. I noticed you still had our rebates and incentive amounts for all the programs. They change every year. We'll be sending new information out at the start of 2024 with new rebates, but that's where you start. There are programs designed for every income level. I just asked a question. Everybody had a home energy assessment? Believe it or not, yes, part of this is preaching to the choir, talking to those people who have already taken action. A lot of what we find, we were just having a conversation about this at staff and with our board chair, are hard to reach, hard to serve on the Cape and Vineyard fall into three categories. It is the second homeowners who are very well off, only maybe rent their home or only here part of the time. And when they're here, the last thing they want is to have somebody coming in doing a home energy assessment and putting in insulation and everything else. But they run their homes year round. They don't, gone are the days, and when I was a kid, when you had a summer home, you basically drained the water and you said, see you after when school gets out. These homes are operated year round. They're using energy year round. So again, focus group, hard to reach, hard to serve, especially on the Outer Cape, and most importantly on the Vineyard, are the second homeowners. The other are working people like myself, Mariel, and those of you who are still working, don't have the time to take off from work. Even though we do have evening appointments and weekends, they've got kids to get to soccer, they're dealing with life. Again, a group that we're constantly trying better ways to find. And then the third are those that are retirees that are on either fixed income, they might own their home might be on the water, but they're still on, gone with their pension and they're on Social Security. So those are our three target groups to reach out to for energy efficiency. And we have programs specifically geared and targeted to bring very rich incentives for moderate income customers, income eligible customers, renters, landlords. Again, all of these tools that we've been refining over the last 20 years to make sure that our customers are not left behind. So the next time you go to a group, it isn't just, you're not talking to people who've had it. You say, oh, I just did that. And it was successful, and it helped me lower my overall energy bill. And again, electrification, and then increasing solar renewables on the grid. That's how Massachusetts, that's how the Cape, that's how we're going to reach and solve our climate goals. And it's a slog. If you follow what's happening locally on, offshore wind and landing in Barnstable, It's not easy. It involves difficult conversations and policy choice. The other reason, and this is literally, we just had a technical session on this today that was very, very, very hard to follow. I don't know if you want it, Mariel. I don't know if it was very technical about something called the Clean Heat Standard. Again, in Massachusetts law, the Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, Mass DEP, is required to develop a clean heat standard. And I can read it to you. It says, would require heating energy suppliers to replace fossil fuel heating with clean heat pumps. Again, pushing, driving electrification. So it is going to be, in a nutshell, anyone who heats with oil, propane, and natural gas will now be seeing a surcharge added to your fuel bills. And the goal is to increase the price of fossil fuels so that they become less attractive, lowering the price, hopefully, of electricity by bringing in other renewables or making them competitive, so that the choice, because right now over 50% of the customers on the Cape heat with natural gas, and asking somebody to move into and electrify their home, you're putting them in a higher energy burden. So it is, it's a carbon tax, Massachusetts style, but it is going to be increasing those delivered fuels, oil, propane, and natural gas, and with the intent of making them cost competitive with electricity, so that electrification of a home isn't something that somebody says, I can't afford to do that, why would I do that? Those regulations are being discussed. There was a tech session today, there are 2 public hearings in the evening, all via Zoom, for customers to tune in. It's designed to generate, just like anyone has solar? Anyone has solar in their home? So you have to sell your RECs, you get credits for them. Very similar. It's designed for heat pump installers or aggregators to generate revenues so that customers then will bring down the cost of heat pumps, because if you've installed a heat pump or electrified your home lately, it's incredibly expensive. So again, it is just like we created a market to stimulate solar, but we had SRECs, and we had renewable, we had RECs, and we had SRECs, and we had smart. This is the same thing, designed to lower the cost of heat pumps and move and encourage people to electrify their home. So be aware, your delivered fuels will be increasing, and that's Massachusetts' first step towards electrification. Questions on the heat standard? If you have questions on anything.
I have a question. So it says delivering biofuels. What does that mean?
I am hard of hearing, so I didn't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. It says delivering biofuels. It says installing heat pumps and delivering biofuels. What are biofuels?
Biofuels are like an ethanol-based corn. Some oil deliveries have biofuels. If you remember, if you heat with oil, if you maybe remember self-reliance, it's cleaner than oil. It is mixed with agricultural products, ethanol, soy. I can't remember. And
like food waste,
food waste.
oils.
You could do something to bio. Yes.
Would that also include, would that
I'm not sure where.
increase?
So that's a way for the companies that are currently delivering oil to deliver biofuel instead and generate those credits that way. So they're trying to encourage the delivery of biofuel as opposed to oil.
The goal here with the Clean Heat Standard is to transform your propane and oil delivers, which for us on the Cape, there are a lot of mom and pop shops. We're not talking, it's not like natural gas where it's National Grid, which is a UK company. These are designed to encourage oil or propane deliveries to start to pivot their business into heat pump installations, maintenance of heat pumps, or biofuels. There are biofuel dealers now on the Cape. I've seen them, I've smelled them. It kind of smells like french fries when you're behind a biofuel truck.
Do you have a list of those companies?
I don't, but Self-Reliance, actually Megan's, an old Wellfleet, Durable Wellfleet, Self-Reliance, on their website, they have a list because they aggregate, they do some bulk purchasing.
Okay.
So the Self-Reliance website will list any of the biofuel dealers on the Cape and prices too.
Okay.
Back to a former slide, where the goal is 1 million homes, out of how many, or,
There, I should have this, it should be planted in my brain. Are there, quickly, if you Google how many homes are in Massachusetts, we can figure it out. I don't remember how many of that housing stock is a million off the top of my head, but when Mariel's talking, I'll just Google how many residential stock. Like on the Cape, we have 200,000 residential accounts. There are several million, but I don't know off the top of my head what it is, so let us look on it. But that's what is needed, and over 50% of the homes in Mass heat with natural gas. Because natural gas is in denser area. If you think about it, where is the natural gas system? It is not in the Outer Cape, it is not in the Berkshires, it is in all of the dense cities. That's where, because it was economics, it was too expensive to bring the pipelines out to any rural or really suburban areas. So it's a challenge, it's gonna be all cities.
There are about 3 million homes.
How many?
3 million.
3 million, so a third, that's a lot. And again, it's gonna come down to economics, it's gonna come down to policy, personal choices, but that is what the clean heat standard, and when we scheduled this, when you called us to talk about this hadn't come out yet. We were like, what are you know, a hint about it, but it is now, it's happening. It is implemented in 2024, I think. At the end, I'd have to look at my notebook because I have it in there. I think it's the clean heat standard, so that you'll start to see this at the end of calendar year 2024, where those surcharges are going to start to appear on oil, propane, and natural gas bills.
How are you working with the commercial side to make the transformation in their buildings?
For heat pumps and electrification.
Yeah.
So the Cape Light Compact has, just like we have residential energy efficiency programs, we have small business energy efficiency programs. So the first thing is to call, schedule, and have a BEA, business energy assessment, and then we have programs and rebates to help buy down the cost of heat pumps.
Thank you.
So this one just shows you the GHG reduction goals, what the state goals were for 2030, what Cape Light Compact's portion of that, because as I said, we now don't, it's no longer saving kilowatt hours, it's about what are you doing to reduce greenhouse gas reduction, how are your plans changing, what are you doing to pivot, to encourage electrification. Many of you may or may know that starting this year, we rolled out our whole house heat pump rebate, which is a $10,000 rebate for electrifying your home, or if you do a partial rebate, it ends up to being about a $4,000 to $5,000 incentive. But starting in 2025, we'll be, if you're in the moderate income, so if you fall within any of the moderate income or categories, you will get an 100% incentive for fully decarbonizing your home. Right now, it's up to 80% for moderate income. If you're at low income, that's 60% or below the state median income, we will do it at no cost for decarbonizing your home. If you have questions, where do I fall on that? All that information is on our website. You can easily look up and say, do you fit? Does your neighbor fit? Does your mother or your in-laws fall within that category? So there are lots of programs to help and incentives depending upon all income-based to help you remove fossil fuel and switch to the heat pumps.
If there's a turnover in Washington in the next election.
I'm sorry, what?
If the election doesn't go well in 2020.
I'm going to Canada, so I'm not leaving. I'm just done.
I'm done. Well, in lieu of that, does the money go away, or is it state money?
So these are our funds. That's when I started these programs. So the answer is no, the money doesn't go away because we're paying for these programs every month when you pay your electric bill, or if you're a natural gas customer, your natural gas bill. So we will always have our Massachusetts. It is a $4 billion statewide program. So that's not going away. Well, potentially could go away are the tax credits. The 30% tax credit for your solar system installing. I think it's a $1,200 tax credit for heat pumps. So you've got a $10,000 rebate and a $1,200 tax incentive. Those could change. Because those are all IRA funds. So those could change, but the bulk of our programs stay with us because we fund them ourselves. But I'm still moving Canada, so I'm done. So electrification and heat pumps. Anybody, you know what a heat pump is? Got one on the wall right here in the library. You can do a ground source heat pump if you're building a new home. That's the most efficient way to build. I'm not an engineer, I'm not the heat pump expert, but if you're looking at heat pumps, you're doing new construction, and you could do a ground source heat pump. There are generous rebates between up to $40,000 for doing ground source, heat pumps. Otherwise, you're looking at $10,000 or partial rebates. The technology works. I lived in one of those electric heated homes that were built in the 70s when electricity was going to be too cheap to meter. And when we converted to heat pumps back in 2017, my heat pumps work. My heat pumps heat my home. I do have to leave in some electric resistance because the heads, it's not ducted, it's a ranch with a crawl space. So I have a combination of old baseboard and bathrooms because you couldn't put a head in there, and then heads. They heat in the cold, they heat it in a polar vortex.
They do, and you don't. I always hear people saying you have to keep your propane furnace as backup.
You don't have to keep your propane furnaces back up. And this is part of the challenge that's happening. A lot of HVAC vendors don't like heat pumps. They don't like heat pumps because, for two reasons. Heat pumps, you have to understand how they work. It is a set it and forget it, as opposed to, my mother turned the heat down when we went to bed. Last one up, had to turn the heat down to 50, whatever we turned it down to before we went to. A heat pump, you leave it, set it at 72, 70, and people, especially if you have integrated controls, I've heard more complaints for people who have left their existing heating system and try to use integrated controls between the two systems, making a mess, and not understanding or playing with them, or somebody, their children come over and say, oh, you should do this. One's on heating, one's on cooling. Kids, grandkids, my nephews love remotes. Leaving a remote for a heat pump anywhere where a child can get is bad, because they'll start punching all the buttons. You'll come back in 3 hours later, but why am I freezing in the room? It's because kids got the remote control and we're having a great time pressing all the buttons. So it's different, and it isn't the same systems that they were trained on, and people have to be a little bit educated on them. But I always say, I can figure out how to run my heat pump, anybody can figure out how to run the heat pump, and that's best advice that I got from the engineer at work was set it and forget it. I have it tuned. Once a year they come in, they clean it, they make sure everything is running just like people do on whatever furnace you have, and then I heat and cool.
Are they the regular, say, the people who do my propane service now? Are they the people who do the heat pumps? Who installs it? Are they separate?
Right now they're separate. They're separate companies. That's what the Clean Heat Standard is hoping to transition. But you've got everybody. There's Whiteley out of Chatham. There's Roby's. There's more Central Cape. There are HVAC dealers. Because we install HVAC contractors all the time. There is, if you're going to participate in the Compact's Energy Efficiency Program, you need to choose a heat pump installer that is listed on what we call the HPIN contractor network. It's on our website, you just click on it, and it lists everybody in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And you can pick the closest one to Truro, who's out there, who's in the program, and they'll do your heat pump.
Did I hear you correctly when you said, in addition to getting a rebate from MAS, is a federal tax credit for heat pump?
Yes. There is, and you have to, on our website, we do have a piece of paper, we have fact sheets on it, as to, can't be installed, you have to install it in, starting, I think, was in 2023. So a heat pump that was installed 2 years ago, you're not gonna get your tax credit, and it's a cap, and I believe the cap is $1,200. But there is a federal tax credit for new heat pump installations. And then the last slide I wanted to show you before I turn it over to Mariel, to talk about power supply, is just a graph that shows you CO2 emissions. And you can see here, green is electric heat pumps, has the lowest emissions. Propane, this is electric resistant heat, natural gas is down here, and then the purple is propane, and then oil is right there. So again, the reason why should you electrify, why should you be thinking about it is you're doing the right thing for the environment, you're reducing CO2 emissions, and then eventually it's going to be a pricing decision. I don't know how it's going to roll out. Will these clean heat credits, how much it's going to increase all of these delivered fuels? That we don't know yet. We haven't seen it, but they're coming. So you're up. Any questions before I turn it over to Mira?
Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. So I think that Maggie's last slide there was a really good transition into talking about power supply, because that last point was that as we electrify and have heat pumps, they will get greener over time, but that largely depends on the grid and the power that is actually being generated and supplying the grid. That's going to impact whether or not heat pumps are really helping in terms of GHG emissions or not. So to start off, I was just going to quickly talk through an electric bill and the two kind of buckets of charges that we see on our electric bill, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about power supply. So on our electric bill, we have two main buckets of charges. There are delivery charges and supply charges. Those delivery charges are the costs for delivering that energy to our homes and businesses. So on the Cape and the Vineyard, Eversource is responsible for maintaining the grid, the poles and the wires, and delivering that power to our homes and businesses. Those charges on the delivery side of the bill are generally set in rate cases at the DPU, and so they're regulated by the DPU and set there. And then the other side of the bill is the supply side. Those are the charges for the actual electricity that is being generated. Those are the generation charges. As Maggie mentioned earlier, in 1997, the Restructuring Act in Massachusetts made it so that customers in Massachusetts have the ability to choose who their power supplier is. So the Cape Light Compact is a municipal aggregator. We have a power supply program that customers can sign up with. Eversource has a basic service supply product. And then there are a number of for-profit competitive suppliers that customers can also choose to contract with. On this example bill here on the right, you can see where it says your electric supplier is NextEra Energy Services. That's the company that the Cape Light Compact has competitively procured to be our power supplier. So they're the company that's operating in the wholesale market and purchasing that power on behalf of our customers. And you can see on the bottom there, it says billing for Cape Light Compact. That's how you could tell on your bill if you were on our power supply or if you're on somebody else's supply. So really tonight we're kind of focusing on power supply because that's the actual generation, that's what's creating those GHG emissions. And so just to provide a bit of background on how the power supply grid works or how the electric grid works, I like to use an analogy of a pool, comparing a pool to the electric grid. And if we think of a pool with a number of different hoses running into it, putting water into that pool, filling up that pool, you could have a hose that's coming from a natural gas generator, a hose from an oil generator, a hose from a wind farm, PV system, etc. All of that power is kind of going into this one pool. And once that power is in the pool or on the grid, it's really not possible to track those electrons. So it's really not possible for us to say that I'm getting my power from a wind farm, because all of that power is going onto the grid and then we're kind of pulling that power out of the pool into our homes and businesses. And so all of that is to say that power suppliers that are purchasing power in the wholesale market and providing it to us as customers are purchasing it from ISO New England in the wholesale market, and it's reflective of this system mix. And that's what you can see here on the right side of the slide. You can see all of the different types of generators that are supplying power to the grid in New England. So about 45% of the electricity in New England is generated with natural gas. About 25% is coming from nuclear. There is a small amount of oil, and then you can see all the renewables there as well. But most of the coal and oil, as Maggie said, in New England has been retired. And in order to meet those climate goals that we talked about, we're going to need to increase the amount of renewables that are on the grid, obviously to kind of shift that system mix towards renewables.
I have a question. Is it okay if everyone wants to?
Yeah,
Okay. So, I have solar on my house. Does my solar just, is it one of the hoses going into the pool? And going back to the previous slide, can you go there?
Yeah.
Okay, so it says solar photovoltaic, that's panels on your roof, right?
So that solar is actually like large scale solar that's connected directly to like transmission
Okay.
lines, as opposed to your solar is installed behind your electric meter. So if you're using power at your house, you're going to use that solar first, and then any excess generation will get exported to the grid. But you'll use it first at your house behind your meter.
show up on that chart.
I don't think so, no. These are like large scale generators that are supplying the grid.
But so everyone who has solar on their house is helping around this, but it's not being reflected on that chart.
That is my guess, but I'm not 100% sure, but I could try to look into it.
That's okay, it must be a even if it's only 0.2%, it must be a percentage, given that, a lot of people.
My guess is, because this is a New England system mix from, you got these numbers from ISO New England.
Yeah.
These are only representing generators that actually have an ISO New England account of reporting. So it's not showing small wind turbines, or small, or any solar that's behind the meter. These are ISO NEPL generated accounts. That's what it's tracking. So yes, there's a lot of small, if you add them up, but they're not going to show up in the mix.
Thank you.
So I just need to make sure I got this right. So I have solar also, and most months it covers everything. I always assumed that it just went right to the grid and then we get it back, from the mix. But you're saying that without a battery, it goes, at first it powers my house and then the extra goes to the grid?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
The other question I have is, I think you can sign up for green energy.
Yes.
But you're saying it's a whole mix, so is that kind of just not really true?
I will get to that.
Okay.
Yes.
Before you get to that, I also have solar, and I'm at year 11, so my SRECs are no longer available to me. But I always thought that the SRECs were generated because there's some agreement that the dirty energy has to have a percentage of their production clean.
Yes.
And if they if they don't meet that, they're fined, and the money goes back to the SREC people. I'm not sure what I'm saying.
The money doesn't go back to the ESRA people. Retail suppliers, so like the Cape Light Compact that has a power supply program, are required to match a certain percentage of their customers' usage with renewable energy credits, SRECs, all of these different credits. And so those credits are, I imagine you're working with an aggregator, or you were working with an aggregator who was selling those credits into the market and giving you a percentage of the revenue
Clean
from
Energy
selling them.
Center, see,
Mass Clean Energy, that's Larry's, Clean Energy,
yeah.
And is Knollwood another one?
Knollwood is an aggregator, SREC Trade is an aggregator. Yeah.
Mine
So-
are only 10 years.
That's a question for DOER. In DOER's defense, the SREC 1 program, SRECs were worth so much compared to like an SREC 2 even, and even more than SMART. So the point behind kind of making these programs age out is that they were trying to encourage people to adopt solar early on.
Yes.
It was a higher incentive. Now more people are adopting solar. Electricity is more expensive. It makes more economic sense to have solar even without any incentives. So
And remember, all of these incentives are paid for by us. So it's kind of like taking out of one pocket, taking it into another. They're all built into our bills. So even though, they're not, which is why phasing them out over time benefits everybody, because it helps put downward pressure on your bill. Because as Mariel said, we all have to buy, anyone who's getting electric supply, whether it's from Eversource, Cape Light Compact, Constellation, they're all buying these SRECs, or they're paying the ACP, which is the fine, and then they're built into the price that they charge you for energy. So all of these things are paid for by ratepayers.
You could look into registering for the Class 1 RPS to get RECs, which are worth a lot less than SRECs, but it would still be some kind of credit generation.
Maybe I can watch it. Okay, thank you.
So now I'm going to focus on just the system mix in Massachusetts specifically. So since 1990, the power sector emissions have decreased nearly 50% in Massachusetts. All coal plants in Massachusetts have been retired, and oil is used but very infrequently. Generally, oil is used in the winter when it's very cold, because 45% of the power in New England is generated using natural gas, and natural gas has priority to go to heating customers. When it is very cold and people are heating with natural gas, that natural gas goes to those customers first. There are a limited number of pipelines and pipeline capacity coming into New England with natural gas. So when the more natural gas that's going to heating customers, the more expensive that limited supply of natural gas becomes. Eventually oil is kind of in the money, and it makes up that, it's able to meet that demand for additional electric generation. So there is a small amount of oil that's used in New England sometimes. So things that we really need to do in order to meet those state climate goals is to increase the amount of renewable energy on the grid so that there are less times when we need to use things like oil.
Ken, where does the oil come in a pipe, literally? I mean,
Oil is usually stored in tanks at generation
You see
facilities.
this canal plant, those big, large green tanks off to the side, used to be stored for oil, when that was ran on oil. So that was barged in and then piped into those tanks.
They consider
If you go down next time you go down to the canal on our side, this side, you take a walk, you'll see all those big tanks. Some of them are no longer in use. I don't believe the canal plant has any capability anymore to run on oil.
I don't think they do
It's
either.
all combined cycle, but
Yeah.
it used to be an oil plant, so they've drained those, but the tanks are still, you'll see the tank farm.
So in terms of what Massachusetts is doing to try to encourage renewable development, there are a number of things. There are state-run procurements and incentive programs that are designed to directly increase the amount of renewables that are supplying power to the grid in New England. So I'm sure we've all heard about the wind. Maggie talked about the wind. Massachusetts is currently planning to contract for 5,600 megawatts of offshore wind through competitive RFPs. That's through the 83C legislation. Massachusetts also runs solar programs. It sounds like you all are well aware of them. The current program that is in effect is the SMART program. That was designed to support 3,200 megawatts of solar. Obviously, before the SMART program, there were the SREC 1 and SREC 2 programs. And I think there was even the Commonwealth Solar Program before those. And as SMART fills up, which it is filling up, there are rumblings of potentially some kind of successor program to SMART to continue to incentivize customers to install solar in Massachusetts. There was also the 83D legislation, which was where Massachusetts issued an RFP to contract for hydro coming from Canada. So the state has contracted for 9,450,000 megawatt hours annually from Canadian hydro. Currently that is held up in transmission line issues, trying to actually get that power down to the ISO New England grid, but that is another way that the state is working to try to procure renewable energy to increase that supply.
Hydroelectric. Many years ago, I got my certificate in solar technology from the 4Cs, and at that time, which is like 2007 or something, they were experimenting with the tidal flow in the canal. And I didn't know if that kind of research had generated any technology that we could use the tides.
There was in the Mesquite Channel, which is between Nantucket and off Chappaquiddick, there was a test turbine, way back like 10, 15 years ago. There is also one test turbine at the Maritime Academy, but nothing that I've seen or heard yet on commercial scale. It's all in developmental,
Using tides.
using tides, yep,
I see.
but nothing on the scale.
At the stages.
The climate state, we need it now, and we need lots of it.
So how many wind turbines does that translate to?
Oof, I have no idea. It would depend on the capacity of the turbines. I know that turbine capacity continues to increase as the turbines get larger. But I don't know if they're like 3 megawatt turbines now.
Yeah, they were.
So
How many turbines are in Massachusetts right now?
onshore, I don't know.
Anywhere?
Well,
In terms of offshore, we only have Block Island.
right, Block Island, and you have the one turbine that started spinning from South Fork, but when South Fork, within the next 30 days, South Fork is supposed to be fully energized, and so is Vineyard Wind, which is over 800,
Yeah, Vineyard Wind is 804 megawatts, I think.
yeah. So and then I think the other project is similar in size, so we're gonna see anywhere from 1,200 to 1,600 megawatts of offshore wind coming on. And then in Mass, there's Princeton Municipal Light Plant has a couple of turbines. There are plenty on the Berkshires, on the ridges. I was just out there recently and observed them, but nothing of, thousands of megawatts.
A few years ago, I visited a friend in Omaha and we drove to a summer home he had in northwestern Iowa. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of wind turbines.
A lot of farmers lease their lands for wind. The issue is getting that wind here.
Any discussion with the National Seashore? Putting up turbines next door?
No.
So in addition to these state-run procurements and incentive programs, the state does also have a number of standards that require power suppliers to include renewable energy credits in their power supply or to match their customers' usage with renewable energy credits. So it sounds like a lot of you are already pretty familiar with those, but generally these are certificate-based programs, and they're meant to encourage the development of renewables or other clean fuels that meet the standards by essentially a renewable energy credit is the clean energy attributes of that renewable power that is being generated. A REC represents 1 megawatt hour of clean power. And so power suppliers are required to meet a certain percentage of their usage with these renewable energy credits by purchasing them directly from renewable facilities or purchasing them in the market. So just as an example, in 2023, there are essentially the Clean Energy Standard and the Renewable Portfolio Standard combined to require power suppliers to match 59% of their customers' usage with either RECs or clean energy credits. And these standards do generally increase yearly, which means that the demand for these credits and therefore the demand for renewable energy is increasing each year as these standards increase. And so the Cape Light Compact, as we have a power supply product, we have 3 different products. We have our standard product and then we have 2 local green options. With our standard product, we are matching those required standards, the Renewable Portfolio Standard and the Clean Energy Standard. And then we're also going above and beyond those standards and purchasing additional RECs to match more of our customers' usage with renewable energy credits. So we're going above the Massachusetts Class 1 RPS, which those Class 1 RECs are generated by renewable facilities that are located or putting their renewable power into the grid in New England. So we're purchasing an additional 1% of those credits. And then that standard product is also purchasing renewable energy credits from facilities that are located outside of New England, but still in the United States. Generally, as you mentioned, like wind, what did you say? Omaha?
Iowa.
Iowa, Texas.
Yeah, so we're generally purchasing our RECs from wind in Texas. And there is a lot of wind in Texas. So then we also have our two local green products, Local Green 50% and Local Green 100. And those products are actually matching our customers' usage with additional Class 1 RECs, up to either 50% or 100%. And so those Class 1 RECs are the RECs that are generated by facilities that are located in New England. So by signing up for one of those two power supply options, you're encouraging the development of renewable energy in New England because the compact is matching your usage with those additional credits. Those credits are being taken off the market, and you're essentially showing that there is more demand for those credits in the market. Those two power supply products that we offer are slightly more expensive than our regular power supply rate because those Class 1 RECs are expensive. Developing renewables in New England is not cheap. And so to purchase those credits, it does require an additional cost. So that CLC Local Green 50 is an additional 1.3 cents per kilowatt hour over our standard rate, which adds, for kind of an average usage, maybe like $8 to $10 to your monthly bill. That Local Green 100 is an additional 3.6 cents over our standard rate, which is like $20, $25, depending on what your usage is a month added to your rate. But signing up for a power supply product where the supplier is matching your usage with additional Class 1 RECs is something that does make an impact in terms of encouraging the greening up of the grid in New England. And so I think that was.
How many people do that? Do you know how many people do take those higher rates to get these renewables?
Yes, so unfortunately with our local green programs, we only have about 100 customers that are signed up for that program, and that's out of about 150,000 power supply customers.
Only 100
So-
people out of 150,000?
And it's a price issue because people look at our basic rate, which is green, we are buying RECs. And when you start talking about RECs and types of RECs, you really have to be talking to a very knowledgeable, hardcore environmental group that will, because there are shades of green. If you talk to Larry, who's the president of Gecker, Larry doesn't like K-Flight Compact's basic power because they're from RECs from existing wind turbines. You're not encouraging expanding renewable energy. Yes, it is retiring the REC, but it's not doing what is our local green is doing, which is growing renewables. But as Mariel mentioned, growing renewables is very expensive. That we don't market. The board made a decision in the last couple of years not to market per se heavily because of the price and the impact they're conscious that they're aware of the price differential. One thing, I don't want to toot our horn about our power supply, but one thing on the basic, it is non-Class 1 RECs. They are from pre-existing prior to 1997 renewable projects. But we negotiated in the contract that our supplier takes all of their fees and
It's the money that we spend to purchase those additional RECs, those voluntary RECs from the wind in Texas and the supplier fees.
And when we went out to bid, we were asking for all of the suppliers to bring us something to promote renewable energy. They brought us, the current supplier brought us two things: an option to do power purchase agreement for 5 megawatts of solar of a large-scale solar farm, which we did. And they also set up an irrevocable trust where they take all of the money that the supplier fees and the REC fees, put it in an irrevocable trust, and they build new renewable projects. these projects are they're owned by that company, but they are building new renewables. And do you remember off the top of your head how much we put into the trust?
Yeah, it's about $22 million, most of which has been invested in new renewables. And the supplier has, most of those systems have been in New England. So those renewables are being built in New England.
So, and that was something that the board, they weighed that against cost and felt that was a good public policy choice, which is why they ended up with the contract. And it's not the other bidder. And then I just wanted to check my notes, the clean heat standard is 2026. January 2026 will be the first year that you will see those charges. I think the regs have to be written by the end of next year, but 2026 is when they'll have the first year of compliance.
So that means that the propane bills would be higher?
Yes,
Is that?
propane, oil,
Uh-huh.
natural gas bills will be higher starting in 2026.
Do you think the companies out here know this?
Hmm?
Do the companies know this?
No, we barely understand.
As I said, I was on a tech session, I was like, they couldn't have made it too, sometimes these drafted by really incredibly smart people. But I'm like, if I can't understand it, I don't know how to expect it, nor, the average residential, but it's not a secret. And I'm sure that the oil dealers, the propane dealers will become aware of this very, very quickly, because it's gonna hit their bottom line.
Well, that's just it, I'm just thinking, can you work with someone, we're still got oil, we have propane, we got mini splits, and we're trying to get off the oil, we're still trying to figure it out.
Yep.
Why not work with Marcy Oil, which is, near and dear to your heart, you know these people over the
Exactly,
years.
and that's what the clean
And
heat
would-
standard is designed, they have dollars that will be set aside for training.
Towards biofuel, is that something they could do?
They could move to biofuels, they could transition to, heat pump installers. That is something that is in states bailiwick, that's not something that we'll be involved with locally, but, it's not gonna be something that's done without a lot of notice. There will be
Right, that's what I'm
lots of
saying.
conversations.
So the biofuel gets burned like oil. They mix it with oil and it gets burned, right?
Yes.
Yes,
So it's still putting carbon in the air, but.
Yeah, but it's less, right? I mean, it's cleaner carbon.
Yeah, I think it's renewable because they're growing it, but they're using
Right, 'cause it
fuel
would be-
and fertilizers to grow it.
right.
I just wonder in terms of, it's not taking oil out of the ground, but is it still just putting the equivalent carbon in the air?
That's the question.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
question. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I didn't hear I can't hear it, my ears.
Is it still putting the same amount of carbon into the air, burning it?
Yeah, I believe, yes. And again, how do most exemptions get them? They're lobbied as part of the legislation. We created this industry of biofuels, and now all of a sudden we're saying, we can't use them. So it's a compromise.
Doesn't seem like it should be on the same one as electrification.
Right.
So that's why you should electrify.
I have a question about microgrids, that there are people in Truro that are looking at control, have microgrids. How does what fuels a microgrid?
So microgrids are really the purview of the distribution company and Eversource. And what fuels a microgrid is density and a usage. And the airport, the hospital area is a great connection for a microgrid. You could have generation with Provincetown on their battery. The large battery out there, and concentrated area of dense, another area for a microgrid. It is the ability to isolate it so that it can operate independently in the event of an outage. So it's got a generation source, so you've got your battery out in Provincetown. When it's fully charged, if the grid goes down, they have the ability to, I know that will give, 4 hours for everybody somewhere in the Wellesley, but they also have the ability to break that out, I believe, right?
I think so.
To wall off so that they could just keep Provincetown potentially, longer. Sorry. Swallowed wrong.
There's some more over here.
So is a microgrid like a set of solar panels that's just delivering energy in one area, or wind turbines or whatever, just delivering it to like the town of Truro or the library or?
Yeah, generally it needs to be something that can kind of be like cordoned off from the rest of the grid if there's an outage. You can only, because you can't supply power when there are like line workers in there, so it needs to be able to be
So
sectioned off.
they're considering, I think, a microgrid if we get the DPW goes in next to the police station. They're talking about the library, the COA, the police station, the whatever. And the DPW, that might be a good candidate for a microgrid in the school. Because they're municipal buildings all within, and that's that's a future consideration. It's nothing definite.
Got it. You also need, as Vera said, generation, because you can also, for those of you who have solar on your houses, when the grid goes down, your solar, there's a bunch of expensive glass on your roof. So how do you get become your own sustainability is by adding battery technology, so that you kind of achieve the ultimate goal of the microgrid, which is to be able to run independently in the event of an outage, where your solar panel has charged your battery then is connected through circuits to run certain things within your house. When the sun goes down, then when your battery because you have that battery, the way your solar PV is then connected, you're isolated off from the grid, so that there's no rush, hazard where all the electricity is coming, electrons are flowing one way or the other. I mean, that's like your simplest form of a microgrid is your PV panels on your roof paired with battery technologies.
How many people have batteries now?
It's growing. We added batteries to the heat loan, so you can now take a zero interest, up to 7 years zero interest loan for up to $25,000 to purchase and finance your battery. So batteries have been going. COVID kind of threw a wrench into everything because we had such supply chain issues. But battery technology is moving on the Cape.
Did that recently increase from like 10,000 to 25?
I'm sorry. So
Sorry, this is my video. Did that recently increase the rebate, the annual loan?
the heat loan increased to $50,000 to cover the cost of heat pumps. Because heat pumps couldn't finance them.
For the generator, it was 25,000?
Battery?
Batteries.
No, batteries are running about, what do you think we just got, what did we see in the CV, like 13, 15?
Yes, but that's not what he's asking.
The rebate.
You're asking
Yeah,
the amount of the heat loan, right?
Yeah.
The heat loan is for a battery is up to $25,000. If you're doing a heat pump,
Right.
you can take it up to $50,000.
Oh.
Or if you're combining battery, heat pump, insulation, it can go up to $50,000. But you can't just go up to $50,000 for like a bank of batteries.
Yeah, a question about supply. When we signed up for Cape Light Contact for power supply, we had the option of getting power from a community solar array, and they bill us separately. This one happened to be in New Bedford.
Okay.
I was just trying to.
That wasn't offered through Cape Light Compact, though. That was some solar developer was offering you.
We got it through Cape Light Contract, didn't we?
No, we heard of it.
We heard about it.
A community, so there's a community solar program.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So that becomes part of our supply in addition to what Cape Light.
Not really, actually. When you sign up with a community solar developer, you're receiving net metering credits. It's really a financial transaction. They'll give you the net metering credits that are generated by that system. They'll show up on your Eversource electric bill, and then you'll receive a bill from the developer for a portion of those. You could still be on Cape Light Compact supply or anybody else's supply, and yeah, it won't really impact.
Right.
They're kind of two separate things.
Yeah, it's really not a.
But again, still promoting renewable energy
Right.
by helping to finance those projects.
Yes.
So I'm new to solar, having gotten the system up and running, but I need educating around, you're calling it battery technologies. Are you not talking about generators, or what are you talking about? And is the technology to a point for battery powered generators where that's a good idea, where that makes sense.
So battery in my mind is not a generator. When I think of a generator, I think of a generator that is usually powered by gasoline. So it's powered by a fuel. Batteries technology is charged with electricity. You actually don't have to have solar to charge your battery. You could get a battery, you could put a Tesla Powerwall or any of the other batteries and charge it from the grid. And then keep it and use it as your backup source of power. But it's
But I
separate.
guess that's what I'm saying, I'm just saying a backup source, and calling it a generator because, in my mind.
Okay.
That's what it was.
That's why I was confused. I was like,
Okay.
so your battery.
Yeah, so,
Who did your solar install?
E2.
So E2 installs batteries.
But the question, and maybe, are you asking, because this is what I'm wondering, I've always heard that it still isn't worth it installing a battery. Still is not cost effective to really have a battery.
So we don't have a generator either. You know.
Yeah, so
I have a wood stove.
there's
But-
definitely a difference in that if you have a generator with like a propane tank or something, which is what my parents have, that the generator can run until that propane tank runs out, which is gonna last a lot longer than a battery, especially depending on what you're trying to run with that battery. And so if you have solar, at least if the sun is shining, the solar can then charge that battery and kind of continue to power your house. You're able to actually take advantage of that solar when the power's out. But there are limitations on what a single battery especially can run in your home and for how long.
I think people tend to prioritize, I wanna keep my refrigerator going,
Exactly.
but I don't need all the lights.
Exactly.
We were
Don't
having
forget your
conversations
well.
about batteries. You need 2 batteries to charge and run your heat pumps. So if you have decarbonized your home and it's all heat pump technology, their grid goes down, winter storm. People say, I'll have no, say you have, and everything in your house is all electric. You will have no heat, or, so people will say, if I had a battery, you could have a battery that is just circuits to run your refrigerator. And again, as I was saying, no solar, you charge that battery off the grid and you get X number of hours out of the battery that will run your refrigerator and or a light. It's very, the size of the battery, that's why these, just like the solar installer walked you through that, they would walk you through the whole installation. It's not a necessary way to save money. It's, do I need, when those times that the grid goes down and my house is now all electric, do I want to have the ability to run certain things? Now, you could do a battery, some people do a propane generator, you could do, we still have a Honda handheld generator that when the grid goes down, we take the extension cord and run it there, and it runs the refrigerator, and we have a gas can. That's what we opted for. So it's just about choices and and what you want to, how much resources you have, how comfortable you are with the technologies, and what do you want to do.
There's another option that's coming up, you might have seen it advertised, but in very large pickup trucks, like F-220s, the batteries in those are big enough that you can send some of that back to your house. They're kind of using it as a sales technique, I'm not sure how effective it is.
I've seen that done with the F1 Lightning,
Okay.
where the F-150, Ford F-150, where people are plugging their truck into their homes. It essentially is a battery. Those F-150 Lightnings have much more battery capacity than buying a Tesla Powerwall. So it's not an unreasonable thing to consider doing. Imagine you have to make sure you're still complying with the electric codes where you have whatever that off switch is, the transfer switch, so that you're not electrocuting line workers.
Exactly. You gotta keep that in mind.
The whole storage technology, the battery technology, is like where the solar industry was 20 years ago. It's it's still moving, people who are doing battery now are early adopters, they're usually techies, they like the technology, they're the ones that had they like to do cutting edge things and they like to experiment with them. But it's growing fast.
Can you connect the dots on something for me? Chatham Energy and Climate Committee just had a speaker come in talking about, and I think it was somebody from Next Amp.
Yep.
And so connect that dot, please, with the big battery in Provincetown? Or,
So Next Amp,
Dan and I had a call with them.
what?
Dan and I had a call with them about
Yes, yeah, Next Amp is they're selling, they're salespeople, and what they're offering is we will install a battery in your home. And by doing that, you will get the benefit of being able to circuit and have certain appliances run if you have an outage. But in exchange for that, they're participating in our demand response program, so they're utilizing the battery, so you will be filling the battery, because you can't have solar for the Next Amp, I believe, right? These are non-solar homes, no solar for Next Amp. So you would be charging the battery off of your electricity, so you're paying to charge that battery, and then Next Amp is going to discharge that battery in the summer when we call for a demand response program. Everybody's here on the Cape, they just got off the beach, they flipped on the AC and everything, we need energy. And they'll take those they will control your battery and put the energy that's in the battery into the grid to lower the overall demand curve. And I don't remember, does the customer, other than getting the battery, get anything else?
I don't think so. I don't think they get to keep the connected solutions.
No, I know Next Amp gets that, like the
so-
money that the connected solutions money goes to Next Amp. But who pays for all of the wiring, the installation? I didn't get into that level of detail though.
I think that Next Amp is installing the battery.
So
They're
they're
paying
doing all
for
the
the
electrical
cost.
work.
Yeah, they're gonna own that battery. You're essentially paying them a monthly fee, is my understanding,
Yes.
to essentially rent the resiliency benefits of having the battery in the event of an outage.
Yes.
Except if they pull all the energy back out of it and you happen to get the outage then.
Exactly.
Then
That would be
you won't get to use it.
that would be a kind of a freak occurrence, because normally we're not gonna be calling, like the Cape Light Compact wouldn't be calling a demand response event, there wouldn't be a potential grid peak event on a day where there's a hurricane coming
Right.
or something. But if somebody were to crash into a telephone pole and knock out the power in your neighborhood, yes, you're correct.
So I talked to my solar guy about a battery backup, and Eversource offers something where they will take that, choose out of your batteries you talked about, and you get, I think, up to $1,300 a year for 3 years. That would be the contract.
Is that the connected?
That is the Connected
That's our
Solutions
connected solutions
program.
program.
So on the Cape Light Compact runs that
That's
program.
good to do that. And they also said that they wouldn't, if there was a storm event coming, they would not take it
Correct.
out. And then also they said there was an app on my phone where if I knew I had a party coming and I wanted a 100% battery, I could shut it off and say I don't want to participate.
You can opt out of the Connected Solutions program. In all honesty, I have to ask Dan, I'm not that familiar with all of the rules, but it's the same program. That's part of the energy efficiency program. And the compact administers that.
I think it would impact the incentive payment that you receive at the end of the demand response season, because that payment's based on your average participation, your average battery output during all of those called events. So
Right.
if your output was 0 during one of those events, then you'd obviously be
Yeah,
bringing
it's
down
like-
your
It
average.
could be up to that much. That was a max, they said.
So, who purchases the battery? I mean, does the individual homeowner purchase a battery in that situation?
Under Next Amp,
No, under the,
the homeowner brings the battery. You've gone out, most people buy their batteries through their solar installers, or there are some that have no solar, but they have, they wanted it for their electric vehicle. But most of the people that I know, I'm aware of, that have installed batteries also have solar, and they've installed it through their solar installer.
I'm not sure if this is under your responsibility here, it's just a question that when our condo complex was talking to a solar company recently, they said that Eversource allows only one net meter per parcel. So in our condo complex, we were gonna do it individually, for everybody's solar. But it's not that we can't do it because we can only have one net meter on the property. Is that true? Or is that changing?
It's a single parcel.
There is a single parcel rule under the net metering regulations.
And the only way to get around that is to not net meter, is to do it as a qualified, like we're doing for CBO, right?
Yes, yeah, they could be QFs, but then you're losing the net metering
Revenue.
credits. Yeah, or you could, just install one net meter, but I don't know how that would work.
They said that might be changing,
It-
as a legislature.
The DPU is currently looking at the net metering regulations, specifically the single parcel rule. I think it's only changing for low income residences though, because that's like often an issue in like a habitat situation where there are multiple homes that have been built on the same parcel and
Yeah,
so that is changing, but I think it's only for income eligible.
that's the weird thing about our complex is that 5 of the units are affordable units and 15 are the regular ones. And I did talk to someone about, you said CBOs at Cape and Vineyard.
Yep,
Electrification offering.
that's
Yeah.
our pilot project for deed restricted homes.
And they said though that that's only for single families.
Yes.
Oh,
That was, because it's a pilot project, that's what the
Yeah.
department approved it for, was single family homes.
do you think they'll ever do anything for condos? Do you think it will ever go expand to
It,
condos?
we would love to, but we're gonna have to get, that has to be approved through the Department of Public Utilities in the next plan. Our goal was to, CVO, and then getting later in my queue, but CVO is a pilot project for 100 homes between Cape and Vineyard that heat with oil or propane or electric resistance. We were decarbonizing them, deed restricted for affordability. And for the pilot project, you at no, the homeowner at no cost gets a heat pump system, solar PV panels, and 25 of them, of the 100 are getting battery technology for resilience. And again, the reason why we're focusing on deed restricted income eligible is because they have been left behind. When you look at all of the installs for who's installing solar, it is like less than single digits in percentages, it's under 5 of the total homes installing solar are income eligible or affordable. And which we think about logically makes sense. That's why we propose CVO, Massachusetts through the another IRA, they have a solar for all application into EPA for $1 billion for solar. That program will be focused entirely on low and moderate income homeowners.
Is that something coming up or is that?
That's coming up. They submitted their application to EPA last month, and I think they're supposed to get a notice of award by June of 2024.
Yes.
And what's that called?
Solar for all,
Um,
and it is going, that again will be for low and moderate income. So they're gonna have a zero interest loan program. They'll also be doing multifamily. They'll be doing, so they'll be, again, but these are homes that are gonna be targeting or restricted to low and moderate income, is my understanding. So there's a lot happening, which is good, that gives us hope.
I just want to give a little shout out to the Turn Foundation, I think it's called, out of Eastham. They just, left behind, I mean, they help nonprofits to solarize by creating a match. So, for example, the Lily House, they helped the Lily House to completely solarize, and without that, nonprofits don't generally
Can afford it.
think that they have money for it in their budget for it. So I
That's
just
great.
think that's a beautiful model and we need more of that. And Lily House is really grateful, yeah.
Well, thanks for coming out on a really cold, dark night.